Chapter 4. The Shadow Man. Clutching the skull necklace to his chest, Jamal snatched the wooden box and note from the table and bolted for his room. Fortunately, his brother was playing another old jazz tune on his new trumpet. That meant his parents would be distracted, and Jamal could be alone. Jamal shut the door behind him. His heart thumped fast in his chest, reminding him of how he had felt when he saw those dolls watching him from the shop window. He flopped down onto his bed to examine the necklace closer. He ran his fingers over the skull, feeling the indentations of the eye sockets. "Come on, do it again," he whispered to the necklace, looking for a button or switch or battery chamber that could explain the flicker of light. But the skull's eye sockets remained dark. No flashlight of light, nothing. It was just a weird necklace. He studied the note again. "Beware of the shadows. This will protect you." He read it over and over until the words blurred together, but still no meaning revealed itself to him. He checked the box, too. Maybe there was a secret panel, or some other clue about the necklace and why it glowed with red light. But still nothing. Disappointment coursed through him for the 1,000th time that day. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him after all, just like the dolls. He sighed. "Stupid hunk of junk," he muttered, feeling angry. He shoved himself off the bed and stood over the trash can. He just wanted to be rid of it. What do I need with a gross, ugly skull necklace anyway? He hit the trash can's pedal with his foot and the top gaped open. But the second he thrust the necklace over the can, the eye sockets began to glow again. Jamal froze, afraid to move in case it made the light die out. He stared at the skull, making sure what he saw was real. The eye sockets glowed with eerie red light, like something demonic. How in the... Jamal removed his foot from the trash can pedal. The lid slammed shut. Only then did the necklace stop glowing. The light slowly faded until the eye sockets were dark again. But this time, there was no mistaking what he had seen. The necklace had definitely been glowing with mysterious light. He couldn't explain it, but it was real. On impulse, he fastened the chain around his neck, feeling the weight of the skull dangling from it. He remembered his mother saying that his grandmother had never taken it off. "Protection, huh?" he said, his eyes flicking back to the strange note. Even though he didn't understand it, he could use some protection, right? He thought of Colton bullying him. Maybe the necklace could help. Not like he had anything left to lose. He tucked it under his shirt to hide it. He didn't want anyone to see him wearing it. After all, it looked weird. Still, he felt uneasy, remembering the skull's glowing red eye sockets. If it could do that, what else could it do? "Hey, wait for me!" Jamal yelled as the school bus's door began to close, but the door slammed right in his face and the bus left without him, speeding off in a noxious cloud of exhaust. He ran after it, but he wasn't fast enough to catch up. The driver didn't even notice him. What else was new? The last thing he saw was Riley watching him through the back window as the bus careened around a corner, leaving him alone on the curb in front of the school. His heart sank. "Invisibility powers strike again," Jamal muttered, staring at his own shadow stretching across the asphalt. He wished more than anything that he could be sitting on the bus next to Riley, bantering away about their school day. The bus vanished from his view, swallowed up by the busy city streets. The sun beat down on his back without mercy, clinging to the pinnacle of the sky. That hurricane was still building in the Gulf, but no one would know it was it from the clear blue overhead. Even though it was one of those classic sweltering New Orleans days, Jamal would have to walk home. His mom had to pull a long shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. and his father was at the car dealership where he worked as a salesman. Barring a real emergency, they wouldn't be able to pick him up. Missing the school bus certainly didn't count as an emergency in their books. He could already hear his father's stern voice. "Son, maybe if you walk home, you'll learn not to be late for the bus." But it wasn't his fault. For some reason, the bus driver never seemed to notice him, even when he was there on time. This was just the final insult in another terrible day at school. "Lot of good you did," he said, feeling the skull necklace under his shirt, his fingers slipping over the eye sockets. He'd worn the ugly thing to school, keeping it hidden under his shirt, in hopes that it would help. According to his grandmother's note, it was supposed to protect him. "Look, I really don't want any trouble," Jamal stammered, scared. His back hit the back wall. There was nowhere to run. Oh. Sorry, guys. But protect him from what? Certainly not getting left on the curb by the school bus and having to trudge home in the oppressive heat. Even worse, Colton had been giving him the evil eye all through gym class. Clearly, he was still furious about the previous day. Only Malik's presence had prevented Colton and his crew from doing something about it. But his brother wouldn't always be around. Sooner or later, Colton would get Jamal alone, and then all bets would be off. Jamal felt his stomach churn at that thought. He tried to push it from his mind and cheer himself up. Maybe walking home would clear his head and rid him of those worries for a while. Also, if there was one good thing in his life, it was the city where he lived. Despite the humidity and threat from hurricanes, he loved New Orleans. The parades, the food, the music, even the tourists who crowded the cobblestone streets in the French Quarter. There was no other place like it in the world. He passed through New Orleans Square. As he walked by Tiana's, the most delectable smells drifted from inside. Jamal's mouth watered as he cut through the crowds, weaving down the busy streets. But even the vendors selling beignets and steaming cups of gumbo and musicians playing jazz music couldn't brighten his mood. With each step, more sweat dripped down his back, and the skull necklace thumped against his chest. Demoralized and overheated, he rounded the next corner and cut through a back alley, where he bumped right into the bullies from school. "Look, it's Invisible Boy," Colton sneered when he saw Jamal. They were eating beignets, their lips dusted with powdered sugar. "Where's your big brother now?" Colton said, advancing on Jamal. The bully clenched his fists. Jamal tried to back away, but the other kids flanked Colton, blocking any escaped route. He was trapped. He glanced around, but the alley was deserted. There was nobody nearby to help. Not that anyone could have noticed him anyway. "He's not here to protect you now," Colton said. "What you gonna do?" "Look, I really don't want any trouble," Jamal stammered, scared. His back hit the brick wall. There was nowhere to run. "You should have thought of that yesterday," Colton growled, "and taken your punishment for making us lose." The other kids circled around, trapping Jamal. Adrenaline rushed through his veins, making his heart pound. Desperately, he reached into his shirt and pulled out the skull necklace. He thrust it up in front of Colton. "Okay, do your thing," Jamal muttered to the necklace. "Protect me." The skull dangled from his hands, swaying slightly. But nothing happened. The necklace didn't glow. The bullies burst out laughing, Colton most of all. "Look, he's wearing a necklace," he said, doubling over with laughter. But the necklace did one thing that helped. It distracted the bullies. While they were busy catching their breath, Jamal ducked around Colton and bolted down the alley. He ran as fast as he could, but he heard their pounding feet behind him. Fortunately, he knew those streets like the back of his hand. He darted into the next alley, tore around the corner past street vendors and befuddled tourists, and ran into another alley. This one was darker and completely deserted. It snaked past the shop he'd seen from the bus the other day. the one with the creepy dolls in the window. But he didn't have time to worry about that. There was a large dumpster in the alleyway. It smelled like bad things, rotten things, putrid things. Jamal ducked behind it anyway and held his breath, pinching his nostrils shut. Sweat slicked his skin and dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. His feet sloshed into an oily, stinking puddle. He felt the water seeping into his sneakers. Please, run past me, he thought in desperation. If there was ever a good time to be invisible, this was it. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the bullies bolted past the alley. Hey, where'd he go? Colton yelled as they ran by. He sounded furious. He's gonna pay for this. Jamal's stomach dropped. The next day at school would be even worse, but he would have to deal with that later. He held his breath and waited to make sure they were gone. Then he crawled out from behind the dumpster. Maybe Riley was right about invisibility powers being stronger, he thought. They did just save him, but at what cost? His shoes were soaked and stained black from that nasty puddle. His clothes were wet with sweat and smeared with grime from crouching behind the dumpster. The necklace dangled uselessly from the chain around his neck. He ripped it off and held it up. The skull stared back at him. Protect me? He sneered at it. Yeah, right, useless piece of junk. I'm not falling for that dumb trick again. He was about to toss it into the dumpster when suddenly the eye sockets flared with light again, much brighter than before. What the? Why now? Jamal cried. Suddenly, the shadows in the alley started to move and contorted into monstrous shapes, like they were alive. Jamal froze in fear. Shadowy jaws snapped at him. The necklace flared brighter in response. The flare of light lit up the alley and made the shadows vanish. It was actually protecting him. What in the? Jamal said. But then a dark silhouette suddenly stepped into the alley, blocking the entrance. In the light cast by the necklace, the shadowy man slowly came into focus. His arms and legs seemed impossibly long, giving him a skeletal appearance. He wore a black top hat with a skull and crossbones on it, as well as a purple feather sticking out of a sash tied around the brim, above the brim. His purple coat with tails hugged his thin arms. His long black pants ended in a pair of shiny white shoes, and he held a cane with a purple crystal sphere on top. Jamal stared at the strange man, terrified. His heart thudded, matching the pulsing light emanating from the necklace. The man's eyes fixed hungrily on the necklace. Quickly, Jamal fastened it around his neck again and tucked it under his shirt. He could feel heat emanating off it, singeing his skin and making him sweat more. It had never glowed so brightly before. Jamal swallowed hard. Who are you?